This show is sponsored by levities.co. Raw, edgy, humorless apparel. You don't have to agree with us. Remember, you have that right. Thank you. Welcome to another episode of Mind Matters, the talk program that provokes critical thinking, logic, and reason. We encourage all of our listeners to use their common sense in all of their decision making, especially if it involves an issue that you think is important or one that affects your liberties and God-given rights. Hey Dan, how you doing, buddy?
Hi, John.
Welcome back, listeners, to another episode of Mind Matters. This is Mind Matters number 30. We've hit a milestone, and we thank you for listening and giving us the support. And thank you, Dan, for giving me some lively conversation that provokes critical thought and implores me to use my logic and reason. These are some interesting times, to say the least. And but haven't they always kind of been interesting times? Today we're going to talk about the history of political enemies and what that really means. We're on the verge of possibly a former president being arrested by the Department of Justice, or more specifically, state of New York, on some trumped up charges that were thrown out twice. Nobody wanted to touch it, but now we've got I guess it's Alvin Bragg in New York, state of New York, who is now going to bring up these Stormy Daniels charges. Anyhow, what's going on, Dan?
Well, they're trying to live up to a campaign promise, and some very, very ill-advised partisans are going to try and make a mockery out of the entire police system in this country, and justice and overall. My gosh, can you imagine? I mean, talk about a campaign picture that will last forever among the great ones of Uncle Sam saying, "We want you." There will be Donald Trump standing in front of getting his mugshot. That will be one that lasts forever.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, and it's absolutely horrendous. One of the beautiful things about American government and what our founding fathers were able to put into this system was this feeling of checks and balances. That they knew what monarchies did with ultimate power and control, and one of the hallmarks of American government is the checks and balances. And I gotta say, at this stage of my life, we've seen checks and balances thrown out the window, with the kitchen sink. And what's interesting is the demonization of political enemies is nothing new. We've seen this throughout history in places like China, places like Russia and all the Soviet bloc nations, some regimes in Africa and Southeast Asia, some Middle Eastern regimes. I mean, where there's no checks and balances. And if you're any kind of a political enemy, sometimes you just disappear in the middle of the night. I mean, this is bordering madness almost here in America, for sure.
Well, again, I think it's because of our sad lack of historical knowledge. I think that most people think that this is new ground that we're treading, that this wokeness is the thing of the future, that it's never been expressed before. And aren't we special? And you're not special. This has been done 100 times before, folks, 1,000 times before, that we have records of. So, get off your high horse and listen to what you're saying and listen to what other people are saying, and just close your mouth and listen for a little bit, and you'll be surprised at what you hear.
Yeah, exactly. Good point. I know that you're a former Army combat veteran, and I know that you understand the rules of the battlefield. And I know that in combat, with some of those special operations group, they call what's going on now in America shaping the battlefield, by desensitizing people who are watching what's taking place. And, it's almost like we're seeing things that quite honestly haven't been seen in modern era. Of course, racism, the race card being played. That's another part of this shaping the battlefield. And America, we've had a history of being rebellious. We came up against the strongest force in the world when we formed this country, the monarchy of Great Britain, and we won. And of course, at that time, it was only a very small percentage of the population who they call domestic terrorists now, but those who were the revolutionaries back then, I think, comprised maybe 3% or 4% of the general population. 96% wanted to stay loyal to the monarchy. And so it really took a handful of brave individuals to rise up. And I'm not going to say life was perfect in their lives by any means. We talk about clandestine affairs. I mean, they were sneaking girls in and out of the White House when Kennedy was there. So let's get real here. This is something different. This possible arrest of a president. Not shocking, but at the same time, what's more shocking is how many intelligent people are taking the bait and falling for it.
Yeah, that's the thing that I find disheartening, John. I see so many people that I know have intellect. Bill Maher, some of the comedians actually are intelligent. To see them bite the apple and buy into the nonsense and just ignore facts, ignore truths, ignore things they see with their eyes. How can anybody looking at those January 6 tapes see that as an insurrection? I mean, my gosh, these people, what kind of historical background have these people got that they would think that resembles what happened in Bastille Day and on July 14th in France many years ago, just about the same time the stuff was going on here. It's crazy, man. And now we hear rumors that they're going to be arresting more. So it's a declaration of war against the citizens, and that's a pretty serious situation to be in. Without putting blame anywhere, just stand back and look at the situation where your government is threatening to jail and mugshot somebody who represents the will of 74 million Americans. Not a good plan. Just not a good plan. Where are all the management consultants that are always telling us how to negotiate and how to work with others? What do they say about this? Let's make half of the population of the United States. Let's label them and identify them legally as domestic terrorists. Let's try that and see how that works. Well, the obvious intent is to destroy the whole system. That eventually everything's so crazy that everybody will throw up their hands and the whole thing will come crashing down. But it's such a disappointment. It's such a disappointment to me, to some of my friends that I thought were rational, but it turns out they are not. It's just a horrible disappointment, and I'm so sorry to see this happen, and especially coming from a military family where this was not something that was just discussed at the dinner table every now and then. This sort of thing was a way of life, protecting the system that protects our freedoms.
Yeah, some great points there, Dan. And, it reminds me of an old movie that a lot of people seen, The Wizard of Oz. And, he's telling the man behind the curtains, telling people not to pay attention to him. Pay no attention to that man behind the curtain. And it's kind of like when the Summer of Love took off with the George Floyd. It event that took
Chad.
place, which was horrific. But, there was a commentator out there for a well-known mainstream media outlet saying, this is a peaceful protest. And, we talk about insurrections, and there was a building on fire behind him. And it's kind of like pay no attention to the guy behind the curtain. And then when you talk about political enemies, one closer, not closer to home, but one that we all know, Mark Zuckerberg, I think one year gave $400 million to the Democratic Party. And I question if he really did that out of the generosity of his heart. What do you think about that when it comes to political enemies?
Yeah. Well, it was obvious to me that he was coerced into donating $400 million. I think anybody would have to be coerced into donating $400 million. Even Elon Musk it would take a lot of coercion.
So great points, Dan. I mean, yeah, he would have to be coerced to give that amount of money. Let me ask you this, because you mentioned your intellectual friends, and we have quite a few of those who seem to be fallen or who have drank the Kool-Aid. Do you think that, without being disrespectful, do you think that these people are useful idiots?
I don't know, John. There's a number of potential reasons when you ask, as a critical thought, but sometimes people just go along to go along. They pick the winning team, and that's where they want to be. So there's that possibility. There's the possibility that people actually do believe that you have to differentiate people into menstruating persons and non-menstruating persons. So some people can really believe it. Others that hear it and are just absolutely shocked, and I guess I fall in line with that. That I guess I had more confidence and faith in the intellect of a free people. And to be free requires a certain amount of responsibility. And I'm afraid that even the good people in this one aren't living up to their responsibility of being knowledgeable and speaking out against these things that are going wrong. To go and try and arrest another 1,000 people on January 6th insurrection. But one thing is it's certainly revealing, it's very revealing of the motives of the centralized powerful government, that it do not represent the people that they profess to represent. They represent some minority of businesses, some minority of educators in the universities, the teachers union, which has always been a Marxist organization that for some reason we, us intelligent people gave the Marxists and socialists the power to influence our children. That's our doing. Why is there not total freedom of sending your child wherever he wants to go to school? The reason is because then they lose the opportunity to indoctrinate an entire generation of people. So
yeah, that's a great point. And you mentioned the word responsibility, and with freedom does come great responsibility. And my gosh, all you have to do is look around today, listen to the radio, see what's on social media, watch the news services, and there's so much irresponsibility taking place that it blurs the lines of what's real and what's not real. And again, we get back to desensitizing people, indoctrinating people, like you just said, Dan, and shaping the battlefield. What's the solution to all of this for people who are listening?
Well, I don't know what the solution is, but I know that it has to be taken one tiny step at a time, and just as many of us have been advised, take it one step at a time, and communicate with the people that are making decisions for you. And that's, I guess, what we're doing right now. That's effective, but there is no prescription to get us out of what we're doing right now. The nonsense has to just flat out be rejected, which one day it will, because lies cannot exist. One of the things that we developed, you and I developed early on, is that misinformation dies or Darwinian death because it no longer serves a purpose. Truth, on the other hand, prevails and lasts.
Yeah, I remember an American politician when we were going through the impeachment process with the former president. And I remember this person standing up and he was talking about crazy, kooky Russian disinformation. And this guy's still in his office. And it's been disproven. It's been debunked by some of the people out there, experts on what really took place. And, you know, that's the amazing thing. And I think that what people are feeling now, so many people that we talk to, is that they are feeling powerless. You know, we're not trying to push fear here. We're trying to empower people by being critical thinkers and provoking them to using logic and reason and common sense, which quite often these days seems to have just, like we said earlier, flown out the window with the kitchen sink. And so when we see these things taking place and really there's no consequences, then you have things like we're starting to see en masse, you know, these mob scenes where people are beating each other up. And it's gotten to the point to where it is almost like we're living in what Rod Serling would say is the Twilight Zone. And so we have to somehow use the gray matter and ask questions. And maybe you're right, Dan. Maybe it starts at the local level. Call your local officials. Ask them what's going on. Call your state representatives. You know, if we don't start to show an interest in this great country of ours, and I mean a real interest, then we stand the chance of losing it and leaving a legacy that will forever live in infamy. I mean, I have to somehow believe that truth and justice and the American way will somehow prevail throughout all of this.
Well, I'm with you, and I certainly have that belief and hope. At times I'm discouraged, and this whole exercise of trying to arrest and mugshot Donald Trump is the purpose of that, the political purpose of that, is to show the people that supported him have no power. It's a demonstration of brute force. It's bullying to the maximum extent, and but we won't hear other people call it bullying because they're on the side of the bully. So,
yeah, that's a great point.
Interesting times, but not encouraging.
Right. And, you know, political enemies are nothing new. We want to let listeners who are still with us know. We thank you for continuing to support Mind Matters with my co-host, Dan Ploger. We just want people to know that political enemies are nothing new. The demonization of those who you oppose are practices that have gone on since the age of government. And to see it in America, you're right, Dan. It's astonishing to the level that we see it now, but it's not unlike things that we have seen in the past. And I pray and I hope that people will take heed and start to do the things in their lives, like educating their children or making wise decisions, and to make sure that we carry on this great legacy, which those few people absolutely hate. They hate that people might absolutely have some power. And you're quite right, Dan. If he's mugshot, if Donald Trump is arrested and mugshot, it's nothing more but a display of brute force and bullying at the highest level. Yeah. Thanks, Dan. I appreciate you, man.
Thank you, John. Good talking.
Use your mind because it does matter. And if you don't, then maybe we're just going to have to deserve what we get. Thank you. Thank you for listening to another episode of Mind Matters. Remember, your mind matters, but only if you use it. Stay alert, stay alive, keep your eyes wide open. Unleash the power of your mind. Wear a levity, raw, edgy, humorless apparel for the discriminating activist. Live free or cry.